In this tutorial, we're going to talk about Newton's third law, also known as the law of interaction. Specifically, we're also going to relate it to the different physical phenomena that we can explain using this particular law. So as a quick recap, we have Newton's first law before this third law, of course, and then we've also had Newton's second law in a separate video, and these are the descriptions of those two laws. In this video, we're going to focus on Newton's third law, but we're actually going to end up relating it with the second law as well. And then, of course, it started with Isaac Newton, obviously. And just to give you a perspective of what was going on in his mind back then when he was coming up with his Newton's third law, I want you to imagine this scenario. Maybe there's a table in front of you right now. Not sure, but just imagine. Or if there's actually a table in front of you, press your palm or hand against the table and feel what it's doing to you. Of course, you should sense that the table is actually pushing your hand back as well. If you're sitting on a swivel chair with wheels, of course, then definitely you can even be pulled backward by this table. And that's a proof that the table is actually pushing back on your palm or on you as a whole. So what Isaac Newton realized is that whenever you exert force on something, it's impossible for that object not to do the same thing back at you. So if you are exerting a force against the table, like you're pushing it, then this table also pushes back on your hand. And that is eventually what became Newton's third law. Just to give you more examples, if you kick a soccer ball, for example, according to Isaac Newton, then that soccer ball also pushes back on your foot, which makes sense because you're both touching each other. So the point is that you cannot touch something without being touched in return. So his idea kind of makes sense, right? And the same thing when you slap someone. Yeah, you feel like you've hurt a person, but if you think about it, that person's face is actually hitting your hand as well. And the harder you slap that person's face, the more painful it is for your hand. So that's basically the idea of Newton's third law. Whenever you exert a force on one object, then it exerts back a force on you. So this is the formal statement of Newton's third law. It states that if object A exerts a force on object B, an action force, then object B exerts a force on object A, which is a reaction to what object A did. It also says here that these forces are called action and reaction forces, and take note that they have the same magnitude and opposite directions. We're going to expound that a little further, but just to show you the equation form of Newton's third law, it looks like this. It simply says that the force exerted by object A on object B is equal to the force that will be exerted by object B on object A. And the negative sign here indicates that they have opposite directions. So going forward, to expound the concept of action and reaction forces further, let's go back to the scenario where there's a person kicking a soccer ball. So in that case, again, this is the equation form of the third law. For this particular case, the action force would be the foot against the ball, or the force exerted by the foot against the ball. And then the reaction to that will be the force exerted by the ball against the foot. So take note, it's not hard to identify action and reaction pairs. All you need to do is to basically swap the two objects that are interacting. So if the action force has been identified to be foot exerting a force against the ball, then the reaction would be the other way around. It would be the ball against, or exerting force against the foot, okay? So that's the idea behind that. And then take note of things that you have to remember about action and reaction forces. So first thing, they are equal in magnitude. So it makes sense because the harder you kick this ball, it's going to be more painful on your end as well, because the more it's going to exert a force back on you as well. Like I said earlier, if you slap someone really hard, it's also going to be more painful on your hand, right? Or if you press your hand harder against the edge of the table, the more painful it's going to be on your end. And again, if your chair has wheels, or if it's a swivel chair, then you're going to be pushed back by the table actually, right? So also take note that action and reaction forces are opposite in direction, which makes sense. Like if you push your table forward, then it's going to be pushing you backward. And in this case, if you kick the soccer ball rightward, then the soccer ball will be hitting your foot leftward. So that's the reason why they're always opposite in direction, because of the relative positions of the two objects with respect to one another. Also take note something also very important. Action and reaction forces never act on the same body. And because of that, they cannot cancel each other out. That's an important point, because when you're analyzing the motion of different systems and you're identifying action and reaction forces or just forces in general, take note that action and reaction forces are not supposed to cancel each other. They can help you with the analysis for you to like know or recognize what forces are there in the system, but you're not supposed to cancel them because they do not act on the same body. So in this case, if this is your equation for third law, um, the action force would be acting on B and the reaction force would be acting on the other object, right? It would be acting on A. So they do not cancel each other out because they never act on the same body. So remember that. Before we delve deeper into Newton's third law, I have here a physics puzzler that I want you to try answering just based on what you know so far about Newton's third law. So it says here a horse is harnessed to a carriage and begins to pull. According to Newton's third law, the force the horse exerts on the carriage is equal in magnitude but opposite in direction to the force that the carriage exerts on the horse. So it's saying that this force, pulling force by the horse, is just the same as this carriage pulling the horse backward. Yeah, it's the action or reaction. That's an action reaction pair. So the question is, if the forces are equal and opposite, why does the carriage move forward when the horse pulls it? So that's it. It looks tricky, but I think if I were to give you a hint, you have to know that those tension forces acting along this rope on opposite directions are not the only forces that are present in this entire scenario. There are some other forces that are actually contributing to the overall acceleration or motion of this horse carriage system. And yeah, that would be my hint. But going forward at this point, I'd like us to talk more about action and reaction pairs. Let's just have more examples for you to like have a better understanding of this. So in the case of a figure skater, we can say that an example of an action force there would be the feet or the shoes or blades of this skater pushing against the surface. So that would be backward, right? If you want to go forward, then like by intuition or by common sense, you know that you have to like push against the surface backward. Same with walking. For the reaction force, therefore, what will happen is that the surface will push against the feet, and that will be forward. That's the reason why she can accelerate forward by just, kicking the surface literally in a backward direction. And then going forward, for rocket propulsion, of course, the action would be the rocket pushing the gas downward, and then the reaction to that would be the gas pushing the rocket upward. Or really means the gases are just pushing the rocket upward. Yeah, there are a lot more complications in the total motion or aerodynamics of this rocket or any rockets for that matter. But in terms of Newton's third law, the combustion reaction happening here are actually emitting a lot of energy, and that is largely responsible in projecting this rocket upward in the form of gas, in the form of these gases being emitted. Okay, so that's it. Of course, it takes a lot of energy for that to happen. That's why there has to be enough fuel. But of course, if you are just, let's say, farting, okay, so if that's the case, you don't expect yourself to like just fly upward just because you farted, no matter how loud it is. What you can compare probably is something like this, like those water powered jetpacks. They eject large amounts of water at high pressure. So what will happen is that that water or those water molecules are basically pushing back upward on this entire person jetpack system, and that's what causes the person to like fly upward, quote unquote fly. Going forward, this can be a little weird. I mean, the action force is quite obvious. The Earth is pulling down the skydivers, right? And that's in a downward direction. You might find it hard to like reconcile this reaction force because it says here skydivers pulling up the Earth. It's correct, right? I mean, if the action force is Earth pulling down the skydiver, then you just need to swap their places. It would be skydivers pulling up the Earth, so opposite directions, downward, upward. But you may not accept that immediately. You might say, what means the skydivers are pulling the Earth up? Yeah, actually, that's true. But you might be wondering, Miss, I don't feel that. I mean, I don't feel like I'm lifting the Earth. I tried skydiving. Or let's say if I just jump off the stage from that top of the stage going to the floor because I don't want to take the stairs. Yeah, but that's the real deal. The skydivers are actually pulling the Earth up. The reason why you don't see the Earth accelerating appreciably is because you have to recall that in Newton's second law, for a certain amount of force, mass and acceleration are inversely related. So meaning to say, the lower the mass is, the greater the acceleration. That's why, the Earth versus skydivers, these skydivers are way less massive than the Earth. Therefore, they will they will accelerate appreciably, and you can see that because they're plummeting down towards the Earth's surface, right? But for the Earth, because the Earth is super duper massive, you expect the acceleration to be very low. That's why, yes, the Earth is accelerating towards the skydiver, so upward. However, that acceleration is so infinitesimally small that we don't notice it. It's not perceptible to us. Okay, so for conceptual example number one, aside from, I think we've had enough of action reaction pairs, but for conceptual examples, let's have this first one. It says here, after your car breaks down, you start to push it to the nearest repair shop. So the question is, while the car is starting to move, how does the force you exert on the car compare to the force that the car exerts on you? And then for the second question, how do these forces compare when you are pushing the car along at a constant speed? Well, the answer for both questions is that the force you exert on the car is just equal in magnitude and opposite to the direction to the force that the car exerts on you, okay? You're pushing the car as hard as the car is exerting back a pushing force against you. That's why it's going to be painful on your hands or on your arms as a whole, because the car is also pushing you back. For the second one, it says here at a constant speed. Well, take note of this. It doesn't matter in Newton's third law, it just tells you that the two interacting bodies are exerting the same magnitude of force on one another. It doesn't matter whether something is moving or whether it's moving at constant speed or not. It also doesn't matter if one object is inanimate and the other object is moving. Okay, those are not issues at all. The relative motions of the two objects involved are not a big deal. The point is that whenever you have two interacting bodies, the force that they exert on one another are equal in magnitude. That's the point. So do not get tricked by the question using stuff like constant speed or what. It doesn't matter. The point is that they will exert the same amount of force on one another. You might be wondering, Miss, like the car is super massive. How come I'm able to like push the car if we're exerting the same amount of force on one another? Because no matter how hard I push the car, it's gonna be pushing back against me as hard as I am pushing it, right? Well, the point is that you have to take note that the force that's opposing the motion of the car, if you're trying to push it, would be the rolling friction that we call. And take note that rolling friction is much lower compared to like sliding friction that you might be experiencing against the floor as you stand. And because of the little surface of contact between the wheel and the surface, rolling friction is generally low, and because of that, it's easy to like overcome that force by just pushing hard, especially if you are wearing shoes that have good traction against the ground. So it's not true that when something is more massive than you cannot make it accelerate, okay? It's also a matter of overcoming whatever is the resistance. So low rolling friction, you can overcome it. You can overcome that by pushing hard against the floor using your shoes with good traction. So for conceptual example number 2, it says here, a notebook sits at rest on a table in equilibrium. There's a lot of questions, but let's deal with it one by one. So first question, what forces act on the notebook? Well, okay, if you have a question like that, the easiest to identify would be the contact forces. So first thing, your notebook is resting on the table. So first thing you can remember or identify is that there is normal force exerted by the table against the book, and that's pointing upward, right? So again, normal force happens when there is an object resting on a stable surface like this table. So what happens is that because of the weight of the notebook, the table will exert a normal force against that notebook, keeping it stable and at rest. But apart from that contact force, which is normal force, we also have non-contact force. Specifically, we have the gravitational pull of the Earth that it is exerting on the notebook. So that is the weight of the notebook, okay? Now, take note, you might be saying, Miss, really, gravity is acting on the book, but I don't see it falling. Yeah, you don't see it falling, of course. There's a table, but if you remove the table, it's gonna fall. Take note that gravity is still acting on an object, even if it is at rest, okay? That's why it doesn't fly off onto the space, right? Because if gravity isn't present or actively pulling this notebook down, it would be flying off to space at a very high speed, okay? So yeah, there's gravity acting on it despite being at rest. So those are the forces acting on the notebook. Take note, it's not an action-reaction pair, by the way, because they're acting on the same object. They're acting on the notebook. These are the forces acting on the notebook, but they are not yet the action-reaction force, okay? So, to know the action-reaction force, to know the reaction force rather, let's think of those forces we've identified one force at a time. So the first force acting on the notebook, as we have identified earlier, is the normal force exerted by the table on the notebook. So the reaction force to that would be the force exerted by the notebook on the table. It's that simple. Because again, we just basically reverse it. If your action force is object A on B, then it would be B on A for the reaction. So table on notebook, then the reaction would be notebook on table. That's it, okay? Also, just a segue, take note that the action and reaction forces are interchangeable. So it's not like a cause-effect relationship. They're happening simultaneously. So you can also say that the action force is the notebook exerting a force against the table, and the reaction will be the table exerting force against the notebook. So they're interchangeable. It's not like some cause and effect relationship. These action and reaction forces are happening simultaneously for the objects that are involved in the interaction. So yeah, that's just a point of clarification. And then for the second action-reaction pair, because again, our task for number 2 is to identify the action-reaction pairs. By the way, we're answering B and C simultaneously. So again, the second force we've identified when we answered A is that the Earth is also pulling the notebook downward. So that's an action force again. And the reaction for that would be the notebook pulling the Earth up. Yes, definitely, there's gravitational pull happening between the notebook and the Earth. And take note that for all objects that have masses, including you, your own gorgeous body, there is gravitational force existent. Gravity is pulling you up. You're also pulling the Earth up, even if you're not jumping, even if you're not plummeting from a certain height. And so is the case for this notebook. So gravity is still exerting a downward force against it. And as a result, as a reaction force, Isaac Newton believes that there's also a gravitational pull exerted by the notebook on the Earth. But of course, you're not going to see the Earth getting affected because of its really high mass. And then, of course, if you remove the table in the scenario, that interaction between the notebook and the Earth will be more appreciable because you will actually see that the notebook is falling as a result of the Earth's gravity. For conceptual example number 3, it says here, according to Newton's third law, the stonemason pulls as hard on the rope block system as it pulls back on him. That's true, right? So this mason pulls the block, but as a reaction to that, the block will also pull the mason leftward, right? So the question here is that, why then does the block move while the stonemason remains stationary? Let's deal with the first question. It says here, why does the block move? Okay, when the question is like that, what you have to do is you focus on the forces acting on the block, okay? So again, when you're trying to understand why a certain object like the block is moving, then what you need to do is to focus on the forces acting on the block, okay? So the first thing that we know is that there's tension force acting on the block, and that is directed rightward because that's how the man is pulling it, right? Now, there's also, am I right? There's also a reaction force to that, and that is a leftward tension exerted by the block on this man. That's true. There's also this tension force in here, but we don't care about this, and that is because, again, if we're trying to understand why the block is moving, we have to focus on the forces acting on the block. Now, the pull given by this block on the man, which is directed leftward as a tension force, it's not acting on the block itself. That is a force exerted by the block on the man. So we're not going to include that in our analysis, okay? So again, the tension force acting on the block is something we can consider because it's acting on the block. But apart from that, there is one more force that is acting on this block in the horizontal axis, and that is the friction between the block and the floor. You might be saying, Miss, are those all the forces, just tension and then friction? There's also gravity and normal force, right? Yes, but normal force and gravity are along the y-axis, and there's no acceleration along y, so we don't care about the vertical axis because the motion we're talking about here is the horizontal motion. So we're just gonna care about the forces that are acting horizontally. So that's rightward tension and then leftward friction. Now again, going back to the question, why does the block move? Well, this block is, at least as far as we could judge from the picture, this block has a smooth underside, and in that case, this frictional force, specifically static friction, is most probably pretty low. Let's just clean the slide. Okay, so again, that frictional force, because this is a smooth underside, most probably, that static friction is most probably low. And if you have a macho man pulling this block rightward, then that tension force along this rope can easily overcome that static friction, okay? And because there's a net force directed in the right direction, then this block can really accelerate to the right, okay? And once the man has made the block accelerate from being at rest, and once it is in motion, he can easily maintain the constant velocity of the block by maintaining a tension force that is at least equal to the kinetic friction that is acting on the block once it is in motion. Okay, so that's it. Going forward with the second question, it says here, why does the stonemason remain stationary? Okay, if we are concerned with the motion or state of rest of the stonemason, then we need to focus on the forces acting on the stonemason. Remember earlier, we were asking ourselves, why did the block move? So we focus on the forces acting on the block. This time, we're gonna do the opposite. We're gonna focus on the forces acting on the stonemason because we are wondering why he remains stationary. So let's think about those forces. First, of course, he's pulling on the rope. And as I mentioned, there's a reaction to that. It's the leftward force exerted by the block on the man, okay? Miss, earlier you said tension is rightward. You drew it like this and it says tension. Yeah, that's true because we were talking about the tension force experienced by the block itself. So that was rightward. But now, we're talking about the forces acting on the stonemason, and that would be tension force exerted on him in a leftward direction. So basically, this block is pulling the man leftward using tension force. And yeah, it's also true if you're thinking, Miss, tension is acting in both directions. Yes, just like in tug of war, the tension force for this particular cable or cord is acting in both directions. We're gonna erase this one because this force is actually acting on the rightward tension is acting on the block. But if we're concerned with the stonemason, we're gonna consider only this leftward tension acting on him. Now, apart from that, take note, there's also this friction between the man's shoes and the floor, okay? Miss, why are you saying that this force is rightward based on your drawing? Well, imagine yourself in the place of this man. For you to move this block rightward, what you're gonna do is you're gonna make your feet push against the floor in a leftward direction rather, right? So if this is you, you're gonna be pushing against the floor leftward. And what will happen if you push the floor leftward? The floor will have a reaction force to that will push you rightward. So that's an action-reaction pair. Your feet pushing against the floor leftward, and the reaction would be it will push you in a rightward direction. But we're gonna erase this because we don't care. This is the force exerted on the floor. We want the forces acting on the stonemason. So the reaction force of the floor on you that's pushing you rightward, that is the one that we're gonna retain in our illustration, okay? So now, in this illustration, we can see that the forces acting on the stonemason is this leftward tension force and the rightward frictional force exerted by the floor as a reaction to the fact that the stonemason is like kicking the floor leftward. So now we see you have a leftward force, you have a rightward force. Going back to the question, why does a stonemason remain stationary? It's very simple. The stonemason is actually pushed rightward by the floor, and that frictional force is equal to the tension force exerted by the block on the man. In short, the net force on this man is actually zero. So negative tension and positive friction that is rightward, they will cancel each other out, and that is why they remain stationary, okay? So again, when something is stationary, it means that the net force on that object are actually adding up to zero. So we can assume here that the tension force is just equal to the friction between the shoes and the floor. So, and that is why it will help if you have a good shoes with proper retraction that will keep you in place against the floor. And then it would be easier also if this is smooth. Like the underside of the block is smooth because you can easily pull it while you keep yourself stable with the help of properly traction shoes, okay? So actually, if you push hard against this floor and you have a really good pair of shoes, you can make this friction against between the shoes and the floor even stronger. And if that is even bigger, what will happen is that you're gonna have a rightward net force that can cause you to like accelerate rightward, and that will make it easier for you to like pull the block. So as a summary for that item, let's look at this. Again, the block moves because the stonemason exerts a force greater than the friction on the block. Okay, and then the stonemason remains stationary because the friction between his shoes and the floor just balances or equates the leftward tension force exerted by the rope on him or by the block on him. Next, for a concept check, you are driving a car on a road when a mosquito splatters on the windshield. Which has greater magnitude, the force that the car exerted on the mosquito or the force that the mosquito exerted on the car, or the magnitude is the same? Well, according to Newton's third law, those forces are the same. The car exerts a force on the mosquito, and the mosquito exerts back the same amount of force on the car. That's what the Newton's third law says. However, it may be hard to believe, right? You by common sense knowledge, you might be saying, no, the car must be exerting harder force on the mosquito. That's why the mosquito gets splattered while the car is like intact, no damage at all. But the reason behind that is, again, the force they exert on one another are just equal. However, for a certain amount of force, mass and acceleration are inversely proportional based on Newton's second law. So the one with less mass will be accelerating more and the one with more mass will be accelerating less, okay? So the mosquito, being less massive compared to the car, will be experiencing a huge value of acceleration, and that causes that mosquito to be splattered, while the car, which is much, much more massive, will have very little and not appreciable or not perceptible acceleration. That's why it's intact, okay? So that's the reason why. So again, whenever there's something that is lacking when you're trying to analyze something and the Newton's third law doesn't seem to make sense when put in a context, what you probably need to do is to apply Newton's second law, because it explains something that the Newton's third law alone cannot take into account, okay? Now, going back to our physics puzzler, again, so the horse here is pulling the carriage rightward, and then the reaction to that is that the carriage is pulling the horse in a leftward direction, or backward, if you like put it in a different angle. And you might be saying, so basically it's not supposed to like cause any motion at all. But take note, those aren't just the forces present in this entire carriage force system. So you have to take note that one, of course, there is a rolling friction associated with these wheels. And that rolling friction is actually pretty low because the surface in contact between the wheels and the floor is actually very minimal because wheels are round, obviously. So it's easy to overcome. As long as the horse gives a good kick or good push against the ground that is projected backward, then that ground will be pushing back the horse in a forward direction. So, in short, the reason why the horse is able to pull the carriage forward is because the horse pushes against the ground, and then in turn, as a reaction to the kick or to the push of that horse, the ground also pushes the horse forward due to friction. And then this forward frictional force overcomes the carriage resistance, the rolling friction, as well as the mass. And that allows the horse to accelerate and pull the entire carriage. Okay, so that's it. Again, whenever you feel lost because the action and reaction thing are telling you about forces that are equal in magnitude, then think about the other interactions that are happening in the entire system. And that's a summary of the key concepts. You can copy them or take a screenshot. That's all for this video. Thank you so much and have a great day.